Welcome back to another episode of What's Between Your Ears. My name is Maggie, and today we're going to be talking about neurons. So what are neurons? Neurons, or nerve cells, are small cells that make up chains. And in these chains, they are able to communicate with one another, give each other information, and these chains are interconnected. So the information has different nerve chains that they can travel through. And these nerve cells forming chains is what allows your brain to communicate to your body and your body to communicate back to your brain. For example, clap your hands right now. So the reason my brain was able to tell my body to clap is because of nerve cells. And the reason my body can feel my hands touching is the nerve cells providing information back to your brain and into the somatosensory cortex, with which Alex told you about last week. All right, so let's talk about the nerve cell itself. The nerve cell is made up of multiple different parts. This is the center part, and it's called the cell body. Wrapping around the cell body is this kind of weird, hairy thing made up of dendrites, and each dendrite has dendritic spines. And each dendritic spine is a little receptor. We'll come back to that later. This part of the neuron is called the axon, and it also has little branches at the end. Axon terminals, or axon buttons, terminal buttons, are at the end of each, and those are where information goes out of the neuron. So now, around the axon, we have what's called a myelin sheath made up of different cells. And in between each cell is a little gap called a node of Ranvier. All right, so like I said, neurons form chains. And these chains are what allow one neuron to talk to the next neuron. So in between two neurons is a space called a synapse. Now, when a neuron receives information through a chemical called a neurotransmitter, it will decide if it wants to send that information to the next neuron. If it decides to send the information along, it creates what's called an action potential. As the information moves down the neuron to the end of the axon, it has to go through the myelin sheath. And as it goes through, every time it hits a node of Ranvier, it has to create another action potential to keep sending the information down the neuron. Now, once the information gets to the end of the axon, it's going to go into the synapse, and the dendritic spines of the neighboring neuron will receive the information and decide if it wants to continue with sending the information along to its neighbors, and then it will create an action potential and continue jumping action potentials from node of Ranvier to node of Ranvier, sending the information to its neighbor. So, like I said, the neurons want to communicate with each other. They want to send each other information. They want to send them along. So the more neighbors a neuron has, the more they can send information and the more they can communicate with your body and your brain. For example, clap your hands. That was very quick. Your brain used tons of neurons that have tons of neighbors to send information very fast to tell your body to move. That's all for the neuron. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of What's Between Your Ears.